Welcome to Westeros.org's YouTube channel. Today we are at the final episode of Season 7, The Dragon and the Wolf. Yay! Finally done for this time around, and hopefully it'll be a nice long wait before I have to gear up for the next one. It's been a bit of a rocky ride, to say the least. And I don't think that the next season is going to be much less rocky, given that it's 6 episodes and they have a lot of things to rush through yet. This particular episode is less rushed than some of the previous ones, certainly than episode 6. And even so, there are some pretty major developments. I mean, less than you might have imagined for a final episode. There's certainly no bloodbath like in last season's final episode. We do have, in terms of spoilers for future book developments, there is a character death and there is another rather major development. And I will do a little bit of commenting on that towards the end. But in terms of how to deal with the episode itself, a lot of it takes place at King's Landing, so I will start with that, which is a huge segment that I will break up into 3 parts. Of course, the reason that King's Landing takes up so much of this episode is that just about everyone is in King's Landing this episode, so we get a lot of people meeting up. Before that, when we're coming into King's Landing and Dany's party, minus Dany, who's off flying somewhere else at the time, Jon is seeing the city and asks, Tyrion, why people, or how many people live there? And when Tyrion answers 1 million, which I think I saw some people pointing out that it may not be what they have said in the past. So I didn't actually have time to look that up, what they've said on the show previously. But if it was 500,000 before, I guess people have been busy bunnies since they last said that. But then Jon says that that's more, 1 million is more than in the entirety of the North. Yeah, okay, I guess the White Walkers have already started killing off a lot of people or something behind Jon's back. There are no specific figures for this, of course, but estimates that Elio have made in the past put it at around 4 million. So that's a lot of people that suddenly have upped and died to make it equal to the population of King's Landing instead. Of course, they take the opportunity to have a lot of people catching up. There's the Hound and Brienne, of course. There's Pod and Tyrion. There's Bronn and Tyrion. All sorts of little nice meetups. The weirder one is perhaps for me when the Hound realizes who Cersei's oversized bodyguard is. Given the way information travels around Westeros, it's a little bit odd that he didn't already know. But they're very good at having information be ignored, ignoring that someone should know something when it suits them for a moment like that. And he seems to, yes, he's seen a lot of undead people lately, but he seems rather chill about whatever is weird about his big brother. They could have done something a bit more with that. It's a sort of, they just felt like they had to have everyone meet and such, I guess. The dragon pit itself is rather underwhelming. I mean, there's no, first of all, I mean, there's a lot of things wrong with how it looks, in the sense that it really doesn't look like it's in the middle of the city, like it's supposed to be. And I'm not sure what the dragons were doing with the seating around the arena. Like, did the Targaryens sell tickets so you could come in and watch the dragons eat, perhaps? And the space just isn't enough, so I think they really should have saved some of the CGI budget for making this look a little bit more spectacular, rather than going for an actual location which really doesn't look like a place where you kept very, very, very large animals. And when Drogon flies in and sits on the edge, you kind of can see that I don't know how many of him you could squeeze in there without them being a little more crowded than I think would be comfortable for dragons. And, if you're going to have a Balerion in there, yeah, not so sure about that one. And of course, the first truce falls flat on its face when Jon says that, no, I can't serve two queens. Of course, staying out of the fighting isn't necessarily the same as serving Cersei, and there's it feels like this is all set up to have specific moments in this episode, specific talks that need to happen, because if you think about it in sort of in the long term, let's say Jon agrees to stay in the north while then Cersei and Dany battle it out. What exactly does anyone think is going to happen if Cersei wins? Is she going to let him sit in the north as king in the north? I find that one a little hard to believe. So the idea that everyone is like, oh my God, Jon messed up the truce, it feels exaggerated. And there's a lot of things that, yes, we know that some of the bits here are Cersei trying to play them, like faking it with urine and everything, but some of the reactions and the sort of, when you think about the logic in the long term, there is no long-term logic, as usual, I'd have to say at this point. And then, of course, when Dany says, oh, my poor dragon will have died in vain if, we don't get this truce, I just want to say, my dragon, I believe it might have had a name, Viserion? It seems like Viserion and Rhaegal have basically lost their names again. I know that it took a long time before they named them in the first place. Drogon got his, and then those two were lagging behind, and now I guess Dany has forgotten them again. It's tough being the queen. You forget little things like the names of your children. I had to dedicate part 2 of the King's Landing segment almost entirely to the lengthy Tyrion and Cersei scene, which of course they really, really wanted to have, quite clearly. So that's why they set up the, truce failing, and then Tyrion has to go in and try and sort things out with his sister. Never mind that, there are just so many things wrong with the idea that Tyrion wouldn't somehow end up dead, even if, yes, it would cause problems. But Cersei has already dismissed the truce, and if she's not particularly keen on it, why not just kill him? I don't know. It just, having those two characters in the same room, obviously they needed something for their Emmy reels, but I've said a lot of times that I don't really care for Lena Headey's Cersei. This scene doesn't exactly endear her further to me, and I also don't care very much for Peter Dinklage Tyrion at this stage. It was maybe fine at the start, and bear in mind here that I'm not a Tyrion fan on the whole, but I'd like to see Tyrion portrayed something like the way Tyrion's supposed to be, which means a much grayer character. But here Tyrion is oh so apologetic, and he just really wants to make up with his sister, it seems. Maybe you can say, oh, they're both just acting, but the way he kind of goes on and on about the children, and even sort of daring her to kill him, which she can't bring herself to do it, and the way that she's playing it, it really doesn't look like an act for just Tyrion to try and, oh, I really need this truce to protect my little baby and everything. It looks like she's genuinely just can't bring herself to killing a little brother. And Tyrion, he is such a whitewashed version of Tyrion from the books. He's gotten over so many of his issues. Yes, Dinklage puts a little pain into it when he talks about how, what Tywin did to him and how terrible it was. But in the end, if you look at where Tyrion is in A Dance with Dragons, which is, the closest point to where he would be now, really, he talks about, his hatred for Cersei is so great that he talks about, when they, conquer King's Landing, he wants to rape her. He doesn't actually mean that, I think, but it's an expression of the sort of the depth of his hatred and how fucked up and dysfunctional he is. But they just can't go to that point. Both of these characters have to be, on speaking terms. Never mind, this is a Cersei who had, people coming to her with dwarf heads because she'd put a bounty on his head. And now, no, when she's confronted with him, she just can't bring herself to being quite that angry. And this is all because they want these moments between characters, which feel ultimately, they may look good. It's like that if you go back to the very first season, with the scene that a lot of people liked, but I absolutely hated, between Robert and Cersei, because it might have been well acted. Like, this one might be well acted. I find it hard to look beyond the characters being such caricatures and abominations of where they should be. But that's Robert Cersei scene was the same. Like, we want to humanize Cersei and we want to make them have something to talk about. And yes, you want to see people talking rather than having things internally on a TV show, but it's still twisting the ultimate intention of these characters and disregarding a lot of things just to be able to have them have this conversation. And yes, I ranted on a little bit about that. The other thing, that meanwhile, while they're having this talk, we have Jon and Dany having another little get to know each other moment in the dragon pit. And unfortunately, while it's overall fine, it has a glaring problem that they caused for themselves, because Dany says she was told by the witch who murdered her husband that she cannot have children. Which would have been true if this was the books, but they left that part out of Mirri Maz Duur's little talk about when Drogo will be as he is. There is no mention of Dany being barren. Yet somehow she's convinced herself that she is. I mean, maybe she's, okay, I haven't gotten pregnant, with all this fooling around with Dario that I did. Fine, she's allowed to believe that she cannot have children after a difficult birth. But no, she wasn't told outright by Mirri Maz Duur unless it happened off screen, and I don't know that that really counts. Alternatively, Emilia Clarke has read the books, so maybe she put that in. But then again, they're not allowing the actors to change things that much this season. So I think I'm going to chalk it up to a stupid error on their part, which is starting to be a really, really long list. In the final King's Landing part, we finally get that long overdue break between Jaime and Cersei. And we get it because it turns out that Cersei lied about planning to send her army along with the rest to go to the north. And Jaime is, of course, very upset about that because he gave his word about that. Now, there are, of course, some of the things that, Jaime points out are silly, in the sense that even if, everyone went north to fight together and they managed to defeat the White Walkers, they would not, nicely work things out afterwards and just divide Westeros up between them. It would still come to fighting. So yes, Cersei is right in that regard. On the other hand, there's a ruse of hers with the idea of I'll just tell them that I'm going to mass my armies and then you will go north and you won't bother me. How exactly are they going to fail to notice that the Lannister army is not going anywhere? Or what remains of the Lannister army anyway. Granted, they do say that the Dothraki, if they ride hard, can be in Winterfell in 2 weeks. Whoosh. So I suppose that in, this haste of going away, they might just notice that might not notice that the Lannisters aren't tagging along. But it seems like it wouldn't take long for this ruse to be discovered and maybe do something about it. But no, it's apparently going to be foolproof. They're going to go up to the north and then realize, holy shit, where are the Lannisters? I guess we misplaced them somewhere along the way. Do you think they might have betrayed us? Nah, they probably just got lost along the way, took a wrong turn somewhere. Going straight north, it's pretty complicated. So this, again, feels like it was just engineered to have this falling out between Jaime and Cersei. Which, yes, they've been holding off for a few seasons now. Basically, we want to build this moment and have it be all intense and everything. And And she's gonna threaten to, or he's gonna do the same thing as Tyrion, tell her to, use the mountain to kill him, and then she's not gonna be able to bring herself to it. It's gonna be an awesome parallel, like cool stuff. Yeah, right. At least it has a nice piece of music when Jaime is walking off. Then again, Javadi did a nice bit of scoring there, just like he did for the final episode of last season. So very, very fitting, I think. And then we get a call back to the when Jaime cuts with Cersei in the books. We start seeing the snow falling in various locations. So this is all very moody and sort of sets the stage for the final season. But the way that they got to this point felt forced. We also have a few Dragonstone things squeezed in between the King's Landing ones, and this is where we find out about the Dothraki taking a fourth night to reach Winterfell if they ride hard, which seems to be fast by some estimates, and then on the other hand slow by other estimates. So it's another example of the time scale being whatever they need it to be. Then we have a scene that is actually my favorite from this episode. It is a really nicely acted and actually nicely written scene between Theon and Jon. Alfie Allen is always good when he gets some material to work with. But I thought this scene was particularly interesting in the light of the fact that there was an interview during the week with George where he, funnily enough, had a question about which I think it was which character he sort of wanted to be and how he identified. And he said, Jon Snow is like the brooding, Byronic hero that you kind of want to be, but Theon Greyjoy is the one I'd fear that I would become. And he says that they are in a very similar situation at the start. They're both outsiders at Winterfell, and Jon tries to do something about it, and he's not consumed by his envy and bitterness as Theon is. So I never really thought of the distinct parallels between them. I always associated Theon more with Robb because they're the ones that were friends. But certainly it's a very good point that their stories could be seen as having a lot of parallels and how they sort of deal with those in a very different way. And I think some of that comes out in this scene. So, whether this is something that George was aware of was going to come out or whether they'd had a talk about it, I don't know. But yes, they actually hit the mark on that scene. Unfortunately, they follow it up with a bit of a silly thing in the scene where Theon decides to go and try and persuade the Ironborn to join him searching for his sister. They decide to have it as a way of having Theon discover the bright side of being a eunuch, aka you can't get kicked in the balls because you don't have any. So when the other guy just keeps kneeing you at the balls and then goes, huh? He's not reacting, you can just smile and headbutt him. Yeah, it kind of looked a bit weird, and it was just sort of silly to sort of almost play something like that for laughs. But other than that, the Theon material was actually quite good. In Winterfell, we finally get the resolution to the Arya and Sansa conundrum, and it is pretty lame. And it is pretty poorly handled now that we have all the bits and pieces. The problem is that if we look at the inside the episode, which I hate to do because I hate watching those smug idiots, if you look at episode 6, they were saying that I think it was Dan Wise who was saying that, I think that, going into the final episode, Sansa is bringing with her a real fear of, what Arya might do. And then you look at what they say after episode 7, and then it's all about, we wanted the viewer to believe this and that it would be, real stakes. We've seen characters die, and we wanted you to believe that this would really happen. They would be really plausible. So what are they saying? I mean, were they saying that it was a real conflict which is the way it played to me, or are they saying that, oh, well, we were just faking it all out all along? I think that either way, it raises some serious questions about how they're trying to get their reactions out of viewers. Because, as I've said before, if you look at the scenes with Arya and Sansa, Littlefinger is nowhere present. So if they are playing a game, if they're not serious about this, then they're playing a game just for the viewers, and that is fake shit. On the other hand, if you take it that they are serious about this conflict, and then I guess the idea is that in the scene with Littlefinger in this episode, Sansa finally realizes that she's being manipulated. Although then I don't quite know how to cast the whole her sending Brienne off. Was that because she really thought that Brienne was going to step in for Arya, or I'm not sure where to place it, if it's supposed to be that in this episode she realizes what Littlefinger is up to. It doesn't quite fit at all. And then I guess we have to assume that in an off-screen resolution, which is cheap, just to keep this moment of where you think she's going to accuse Arya and she's instead accusing Littlefinger, she must have gone, I guess, to Bran and had like, hey bro, you know everything, can you please explain this to me? And then gone to Arya, because Arya isn't surprised when she turns around and accuses Littlefinger instead. And this is all very, very cheap, and it is really fake to do it this way towards viewers, because you're just creating a fake tension. And yes, you're gonna have masses of people going, oh, that's so cool, they were planning this all along, except it wasn't played as if they were planning it all along. And yeah. And this also underscores some of the problems with Bran. Bran is kind of all-seeing, all-knowing at this point, and yet Sansa doesn't talk to him until now. He's just sitting there on all this knowledge and like, hey Sansa, hey Bran, can you help me with this problem I have with Arya and Littlefinger? And then, oh yeah, I don't trust Littlefinger, he betrayed our father, and like, oh nice. This is why I really don't think that Bran is going to be in this position in the books. He's not going to be available for people to just ask when they need to know something, because that also presumes that he is going to sit silent unless asked. I'm so mysterious, so I can't really tell you things unless you ask. It's part of my curse. Yeah, you have to do some sort of logic skips and just pretend that Bran is out of the picture until somebody wants him in the picture. And speaking of Bran, isn't it neat that he's like a VCR? You can just press the play button and then get to see what you want. You know, the scene with Sam coming in with half of the knowledge. He knows that Rhaegar annulled his marriage to Elia and married Lyanna, and Bran's sitting there, nobody knows but me that Jon is in fact the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, but he's a bastard. No, he's not, says Sam. And then, Rhaegar married Lyanna. Can you see it? And yes, Bran can. Bran can play us a nice little video of Rhaegar and Lyanna's wedding. But hey, it's nice to see that they got some use out of Viserys' old wig, and I think possibly Viserys' whole costume as well, and went to great lengths to at least make Rhaegar look an awful lot like Viserys, and that's fine, because in her visions, Dany does mistake them for each other in the House of the Undying, the actual version of the House of the Undying, so okay, that works for me, but I don't know what to think about VCR Bran. And then we get the return of Sexposition, as Bran and Sam talk about the fact that Jon is in fact the heir to the Iron Throne, while Jon is busy boning his aunt Dany. That's all very nice, I think. And a final thought on this would be, I think we need to rename Tyrion to Mushroom, because what the hell is he doing creeping around outside of Dany's room? Not only does he walk there and sees that the door closed and somebody went in, but then he stays there watching and presumably listening. Yes, I get it that you're supposed to be her hand, but I don't think you need to advise her on what to do at this particular moment, Mushroom. And then, of course, we have the finale with the wall coming down. And it is very ominous seeing all those White Walkers and the undead coming out. And then they hear something, and the undead Viserion with the Night King on his back shows up to start blasting the wall. I thought that the first pass when they came in looked really weird. It was way too fast, but some of the latter worked better. I'm not strictly sure if he's supposed to be breathing like cold fire, or if he's supposed to like be shattering the wall with the force of like an ice blast. I prefer to think of the latter because I can't quite logically get it together in my head how he's supposed to be breathing fire when he's now sort of an ice creature, but I probably shouldn't think too much about that. It certainly looked pretty cool, and when they come in through that opening in the wall and start their little march into the north, yes, that's all very creepy and obviously sets the stage for the last 6 episodes being very, very warlike indeed. It's going to be a very expensive season, that's quite clear. I'm going to touch a little bit on this towards the end, what I actually think about the wall coming down in this way, but what I'm going to have to say is, of course, very speculative, because we really don't know anything at this point. It might not have sounded entirely like it, but after last week's episode, this one was a lot less unpleasant. It was a calmer episode, and despite sort of the big moment at the end, and it had less of their incredibly stupid choices. I did manage to get 6 eye rolls, but none of them were of the 360 degrees. My eyes keep spinning in their sockets for a while afterwards. So, hey, that's a plus. The best part of the episode, I mean, this one actually had a best part that wasn't CGI, which has been a long while. It was the Theon and Jon scene, which I thought was genuinely enjoyable, because these were actually the characters. I mean, Jon, for the most part, has been fairly on track all the time, and Theon pretty much so as well. It's just that he hasn't had anything reasonable to do for a long while. The worst is a competition between, I'd say, the Tyrion and Cersei scene, which are 2 characters which definitely aren't on track. I'd like to see them on a track, but it would be a track where there's a runaway train coming at them, but that's another story. And also the resolution to the Arya and Sansa, and the amount of faking out the viewers that whole storyline involved. And then if we get to the spoilery elements and the sort of the big developments and how I feel that might be reflected in future books, well, Littlefinger's death, of course, is the, funnily enough, the only really major death at all this episode. There would obviously been some people dying on the wall, but I don't think, for example, that Tormund and Beric bought it. That would be weird to just have it happen like that. So Littlefinger is really the only casualty. Oh, and the poor White, of course. I think certainly that Littlefinger is going to die. Is he going to die in the Winds of Winter? Maybe. I could see him surviving until the last book. How he's going to die is really impossible to predict at this point, but clearly his storyline is on a very different path. I suspect that I don't think he's going to be in the north. I don't see him making the mistake of going to the north at any point. So I think it's going to be very different circumstances, although I do think that it is not impossible that Sansa is going to be involved in some fashion. Though George does have a habit of not necessarily delivering vengeance to the people who, should be allowed to get it. It's often thwarted, so I'm not sure necessarily that she'll be involved. But yes, he's not going to be surviving the show, this series. I don't see that. The wall coming down, well, again, I do believe that the wall is going to come down. It kind of has to. It's a little bit of the Chekhov's gun of the series in a way. We keep talking about the wall. We have the horn. I think that the horn will play a part, probably. I don't think that it's going to be a dragon, a whitified dragon or other dragon who's melting or blasting parts of it. So, and I also think that we're not just going to see a segment of the wall coming down. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've always, my image of it has always been that the whole thing, something will break the magic that holds it together, and that is going to make it collapse. Because remember, this may be a wall of ice, but it's holding together with magic, and I think if that magic is, that spell somehow is sort of shattered, I think the whole thing is going to come down. I think that's going to be a very different scenario. And that one, yes, I could see that in the Winds of Winter. That seems like it would have to happen there to set the stage for maybe the final part of that, and then the final book. And finally, the naming of Jon by Lyanna. Is he really named Aegon? I used to think that, no, probably not. But when Elio and I was talking about it, he did say that, well, I mean, Lyanna herself, I don't think that Rhaegar would have wanted him named Aegon. He already had a son named Aegon. But on the other hand, knowing about the death of the children, maybe Lyanna would do it as an homage to Rhaegar's other child. And she'd name him Aegon. I could see that. Or she would say that she wanted that, and then I think probably Ned would figure, well, can't really go around calling him Aegon Snow, can I? I'll go with something more Starkish, that Jon. I don't know that I see the sort of Aegon, Jon, how one becomes the other. But it could have been what Lyanna wanted. I'm not going to rule that one out. Although I'm still miffed about the whole annulment thing, and I'm definitely still saying that no way that happened. And that's about it for this season. I had initially thought about doing an overview in this video, but we had something come up today. SVT is coming over to do an interview about why Game of Thrones sucks now. So I don't want to miss being in on that one. So I'll be saving doing an overview. I'm going to try doing one later in the week. We have a lot on our plate actually this week, but I will try to squeeze one in. And if I have some sort of overarching thoughts that I feel are worth putting out, rather than if I'm just going to be repeating myself. As much fun as it is to bitch about certain things, I feel like once or maybe twice is probably enough. So if I don't do another video, we'll see each other in terms of Game of Thrones videos a very long time from now. Yay! But we're certainly going to try and make some Ice and Fire with videos, the two of us. So hopefully it won't be that long until there's another Westeros.org video on YouTube. But until then,